Everyone knows Wrecker Rick, the bearded guy out of northern Arizona pulling monster trucks out of ditches with machines named things like Hellboy. Millions of views showing him rescuing stranded families for free in blizzards, towing semis off Interstate 40, and making impossible recoveries look routine. From the outside, Rick Murphy looks like he's living the dream. 3 shop locations, a booming YouTube channel, custom-built wreckers, a family business that seems to run on goodwill and diesel fuel. But what people scrolling past his videos don't see is the cost of being that guy. The calls that come at 3 a.m., the recoveries that nearly kill you, and the moment when the danger stops being theoretical and becomes personal. This is the real story behind the cameras. The 40-hour blizzard that never ended. March of 2024 was rough in northern Arizona. Not just snowy for a day, rough, but the kind of storm that quietly stacks problem on top of problem until the whole system breaks. More than 2 feet of snow fell across the region, and it didn't come down politely. It came down fast, heavy, and with wind that erased tracks almost as soon as they were made. Interstate 40 didn't stand a chance. Once it shut down, everything around it started to unravel. When a major interstate closes, it doesn't just slow people down. It traps them. Truckers trying to keep loads on schedule. Families heading home. Travelers who trusted their navigation apps a little too much and ended up rerouted onto roads that were never meant to handle winter traffic, let alone a storm like this. That's when Rick Murphy got the call. Cars were stuck on back roads near Ash Fork and Williams. Not 1 or 2. Enough that it was clear this wasn't going to be a quick in-and-out job. So Rick did what he's known for. He went. At first, it looked manageable. A few vehicles off the road. Drivers who underestimated the weather. The kind of winter recovery Murphy's diesel has dealt with for years. Nothing unusual on paper. But the situation didn't stabilize. It multiplied. Every time Rick and his crew finished pulling out one cluster of vehicles, another group would appear behind them. Sometimes 15 cars. Sometimes closer to 20. All of them followed GPS reroutes that dropped them into deep snow with no realistic way to turn around or power through. The road conditions weren't just bad. They were deceptive. From a distance, things looked passable. Up close, tires sank. Cars high-centered. Engines overheated while wheels spun uselessly in place. Rick later described the situation as astronomical. Not chaotic. Not messy. Astronomical. The kind of situation where you stop thinking in terms of fixing and start thinking in terms of damage control. Over the next 40 hours, Rick pulled close to 30 vehicles out of snowdrifts and ditches. And that number matters, because this wasn't 40 hours spread across a long weekend. This was 40 consecutive hours. No real sleep. No proper meals. No meaningful breaks. Just one recovery after another in freezing temperatures. The people inside those vehicles weren't just inconvenienced. Some had been stranded for hours before Rick reached them. Some had kids bundled up in the back seat, trying to stay warm. Some were watching their fuel gauges drop and doing mental math about how long the heater could stay on. Fear doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks like someone trying very hard not to panic while pretending everything is fine. Here's the part most viewers don't fully grasp. Murphy's diesel is contracted by law enforcement to clear major highways. That work is planned for. It's paid. There's a system behind it. What Rick was doing on those back roads that weekend wasn't part of that system. Those rescues weren't billed to the state. They weren't reimbursed. Every mile driven, every winch pull, every gallon of diesel burned came straight out of Rick's business. His trucks, his equipment, his crew, his liability. And yet, when people tried to pay him, he turned them down. Not in a performative way, just matter of fact. This is what needed to be done. When someone insisted, he passed that money forward to help the next stranded driver. Cameras caught parts of the weekend, but filming wasn't the focus. Most of the time, there wasn't even room to think about it. Vehicles were stacking up faster than they could be cleared, and conditions weren't improving. What 40 straight hours in a blizzard does to your body is something you don't see on YouTube. Exhaustion creeps in quietly. Reaction times slow without you noticing. Hands lose dexterity from the cold. Decision-making gets fuzzy at the edges. And in heavy recovery work, those small degradations matter. Rick wasn't pulling shopping carts out of snowbanks. He was operating heavy equipment under massive tension. Winch lines stretched tight. Vehicles shifting weight unpredictably. One misjudgment can turn a recovery into an accident in a fraction of a second. A snapped winch line doesn't leave room for luck. Rick understood that risk better than most. And he kept working anyway, because stopping meant leaving people out there in conditions that were getting worse, not better. The empire nobody understands. From the outside, Murphy's Diesel looks like one of those stories people love to summarize in a single breath. Started small, worked hard, expanded fast, went viral. End of story. That version leaves a lot out. Rick and his wife Nikki started Murphy's Diesel back in 2014. There were no investors waiting in the wings and no safety net underneath them. Just mechanical experience, long hours, and a habit of saying yes when other shops said no because the job looked difficult or inconvenient. At the beginning, it was straightforward diesel repair, fixing trucks, keeping customers moving. Then the calls started coming in for towing, then for heavier towing, then for recoveries that most shops didn't want to touch. Each step wasn't part of some master plan. It was more like responding to what the work demanded. One shop turned into two, then three. Diesel repair blended into towing. Towing turned into heavy recovery. Heavy recovery turned into fabrication and custom builds. Somewhere along the way, Murphy's Diesel stopped being a local operation and started getting attention far outside northern Arizona. People like to throw out numbers when they talk about success. Some estimates put the business somewhere between $2 and $5 million in net worth. That sounds impressive until you slow down and look at what that actually represents. 3 locations mean 3 rents, 3 utility bills, 3 payrolls, 3 sets of insurance policies. And heavy recovery insurance is a different beast altogether. The risk profile is high because the consequences are real. 1 serious accident, 1 injured employee, 1 lawsuit. That's all it takes to put years of work at risk. Then there's the equipment, which is where most people's understanding really falls apart. Rick's most recognizable truck, Hellboy, didn't roll out of a showroom. It started as a 1969 Peterbilt 352. The frame was shortened. The axles were upgraded to military-grade components. The mast was custom-built. Multiple Warrior winches were added because a single line isn't enough when you're dealing with extreme weight and unstable terrain. On YouTube, it looks wild, almost unreal. In reality, Hellboy exists because there are recoveries that simply cannot be done with standard equipment. When a vehicle is buried, overturned, or positioned in a way that defies common sense, you either have the right tool or you walk away. Rick built Hellboy, so walking away wouldn't be the only option. But every time that truck moves, it costs money, fuel, maintenance. We're on parts that aren't cheap or easy to replace. And when it's used on unpaid rescues, those costs don't disappear. They just land on the business. There's a common assumption that YouTube smooths all of that out. That ad revenue and sponsorships make everything easier. They don't. Online income is unpredictable by design. Algorithms shift. Ad rates change. Viewer behavior moves in directions no one can control. One update can cut revenue overnight. Rick knows better than to build a real-world recovery operation on something that unstable. That's where Nikki becomes essential to the story. While Rick is out handling recoveries, building trucks, and filming when he can, Nikki is keeping the operation functional. Scheduling jobs, talking to customers, ordering parts, managing payroll, tracking expenses, making decisions that affect not just the business, but their household. Running a company with your spouse removes any clean line between work and life. Stress doesn't stay at the shop. Business problems don't pause at the front door. Every choice they make ripples outward, touching employees, customers, and their own family. Growth adds another layer of pressure that rarely gets talked about. More trucks mean more people behind the wheel. More people mean more training, more supervision, and more chances for something to go wrong. In heavy recovery, a single mistake by one crew member can have consequences that last forever. Rick doesn't just carry responsibility for the job getting done. He carries responsibility for everyone coming home. At some point, Rick Murphy stopped being just another towing operator in northern Arizona. He became the name that came up when things went sideways. If a semi jackknifed it on Interstate 40, Murphy's Diesel was on the list. If an RV slid off a mountain road after a storm, Rick's phone rang. If someone was stuck off-road in a place that didn't make sense, a Wrecker Rick video got shared, and the suggestion followed naturally. Try this guy. That reputation didn't happen by accident. It was built job by job, showing up when others passed, and finishing recoveries most people didn't want to deal with. It also came with a trade-off. Once you become that dependable, you stop being allowed to be unavailable. The phone doesn't care about weekends, holidays, or family plans. When something goes wrong, people expect you to answer. Because Murphy's Diesel is contracted by law enforcement, Rick's crew regularly handles serious accidents. Overturned semis, multi-vehicle pileups, twisted wreckage scattered across highways. These aren't dramatic moments made for content. They're the after part. The part that happens once everything irreversible has already happened. Even the recoveries that look adventurous online come with real danger baked in. Rick isn't winging it when he shows up to a scene. He's running numbers in his head the entire time. Vehicle weight. How that weight is distributed. Where the center of gravity actually is, not where it looks like it is. Terrain stability. Anchor points. Cable angles. How much tension the line can handle before it becomes a liability. In heavy recovery, mistakes don't scale. There's no such thing as a small one. A bad call doesn't mean a bad clip or an awkward explanation later. It means someone gets seriously hurt or worse.